At the core of our democracy, and you've heard me say it before, at the core of our democracy is that people have confidence that the results of the election reflect the will of the people. And as you've heard people talk about the 2020 election, the concerns that are frequently raised are around voting and tabulation machines and around numbers being manipulated by the internet. So I feel like it's a responsibility of this body and of the larger body of the legislature to do everything we can to ensure confidence in our elections. And that's why when the Secretary of State asked me to sponsor this bill, I was happy to do that. The first thing that this bill does is make it illegal to buy or use voting machines that are connected to the internet. Now that's already something that the state is doing and that county clerks are doing. They're not getting machines that connect to the internet, but there's no law right now that says it should be illegal or says that it's illegal. And so this places in the statute the requirement that voting machines not be connected to the internet, and we not get any that could possibly be connected to the internet. And the other thing that this does in that regard is it requires election judges at the polling places to verify that that's, to certify that that's the case, that the machines that are approved by the Secretary of State that don't connect to the internet are what are being used at the polling place. Just one more layer of assurance to the public that their vote's going to get counted and that no votes that aren't cast are going to get counted. The next thing that this bill does is regulate electronic poll books. Electronic poll books are the list of voters in that precinct that are allowed to vote in that precinct, that are registered to vote. These have to be connected to the internet or connected in some way, networked in some way to the other polling places, because this is the mechanism by which we assure that a person doesn't go to one polling place and vote and then go to another polling place and vote again. So they have to be connected. And these electronic polling books or poll books are already in use, but they're not currently regulated in statute in any way, or even frankly allowed in statute. We're just doing it. And so what this does is give the Secretary of State's office the authority to regulate these and determine which ones are safe for use in Kansas elections. The final thing that this bill does very quickly is there has to be a certification of the voting machines before and after the vote. But right now in statute, it doesn't say when after the vote. It doesn't set a specific deadline. And so what this does is it sets a deadline of 5 days after the county canvassers have voted to certify the election, because there's a statutory deadline to contest the election, and it makes sure that that machine verification process happens before that deadline expires, so that if there is something wrong, the candidates involved would have the ability to contest the election. Currently in statute, they could wait any amount of time, and it could be past the deadline for the, it could theoretically be past the deadline to certify, to contest the election when we find out that there was some problem with the voting or tabulation machines. So the last thing I'll say before I stand for questions is we heard a great bill last year from one of our colleagues on making it illegal to connect voting machines to the internet. This is very similar. I think that this specifies Bluetooth where the previous bill didn't, but other than that, the language is very similar. So we've heard that portion of this before in part. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for questions. Attempt to be brief. So I don't know if my colleagues here have had the same experience, but Leavenworth, when I go around and I knock doors, I'm using a list derived from the voter registration. And when I go up to a door, frequently, the names of the 2 people who live there, the 2 people who lived there before them, and the 2 people who lived there before them are all listed at that address. And so this bill attempts to help clean that up a little faster than it's currently being cleaned up. Currently, there are 4 reasons that a county clerk, in our Kansas statute, there are 4 reasons that a county clerk is allowed to send a confirmation notice to a voter to see if they're still at that address. The first of those reasons is if they send election mail and it comes back undeliverable, they're allowed to send a confirmation notice. The second reason is if they get a notice of a change of address form sent from the voter to the U.S. Post Office. They can send a confirmation notice to see if that voter is still there. And then the final reason, or a third reason, is if they get any other information from the Postal Service telling them that the voter has moved outside of the county, they can send a confirmation notice. When they send that confirmation notice, if it comes back undeliverable, it starts a clock. And if there's no voting activity from that voter over the next 3 to 4 years, election-related activity, and I'll go through what that means in a minute, but if there's no election-related activity, they can, for 3 to 4 years, they can remove the voter from the voter rolls. There's a fourth reason to send a confirmation notice, and that's if the U.S. Postal Service notifies them that the voter has moved within the county. And if the U.S. Postal Service notifies the clerk that they've moved within the county, they send a confirmation notice, and if they get that back, they change the address for the voter to the address that they've been notified for. What this bill does is it creates a fifth reason to send that confirmation notice. And I want to be very clear about that because it doesn't create the reason to remove them from the rolls. It creates the reason just to send a confirmation notice. And I think some of the objections to this bill are confused about that. The fifth reason is if there's no election-related activity for 4 years. If a voter hasn't done one of these activities I'm going to go through for 4 years, the clerk is allowed to send the notice under this bill, is allowed to send the confirmation notice. If that thing doesn't come back, it starts the same clock that the other confirmation notices start of 3 to 4 more years before you can remove a voter. So under this bill, it would be 7 to 8 years before you could remove a voter from the rolls. I wish that it could be faster, but we are somewhat constrained by case law and by federal voting laws that we can't do it any faster than that. So these are the voting activities, the election-related activities that are defined in the bill. If the voter votes, if the voter attempts to vote, if the voter requests or submits an advance ballot application, if the voter files an updated registration card. I did not realize that this is a statute, but if a voter signs a petition which has to be verified by a county election officer, that is election-related activity. Next, if the voter responds to any election mailing at all, that is considered from the election office, that is considered a election-related activity. And if any of those things has occurred, the clerk's not allowed to send this confirmation notice because they've engaged in activity that confirms that they're where they're registered to vote from. The final thing I would say before I stand for questions is that there is case law on this. I think it was 2018, the Supreme Court rendered in an opinion on another case that this is a legitimate reason to confirm that a voter is at this address. So this is a conservative bill, not in the sense of, conservative versus liberal, but conservative in the sense that this is a pretty reasonable bill to try to clean up our voter rolls. I wish it was more aggressive, but this is, we're constrained by case law and by federal voting laws.
Would you relate the word cautious to the conservative?
Yes, exactly. Thank you. That's a better word. I appreciate that, Mr. Chair. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will stand for questions.